चलो गाइस काम चालू करते हैं। आज मैं बात करने वाला हूँ एक ऐसी सीरीज की जो मैंने देखी, स्टार्टअप से रिलेटेड है। सो माय एल्डर ब्रदर सजेस्टेड इट टू मी एंड ही वांटेड मी टू वॉच इट एंड इट्स वेरी 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 गुड एंड वी आर गोइंग टू वॉच इट राइट नाउ। मैं उसके लास्ट लेक्चर पे हूँ बट लाइक लेक्चर सीरीज इज टोटली अनरिलेटेड। एक स्टैनफोर्ड सीरीज का कोर्स है। वी आर गोइंग टू वॉच इट नाउ एंड मैं उसके बारे में आज बात करने वाला हूँ। द सीरीज इज कॉल्ड हाउ टू स्टार्ट अ स्टार्टअप। सो माई एल्डर ब्रदर इज एन एंटरप्रेन्योर एंड ही हैड सजेस्टेड कि मैं ये देखूं एंड गाइस इट्स अ लाइफ चेंजिंग सीरीज। मतलब मैंने इतना कुछ सीखा है, मेरे को लिटरली अभी भी यकीन नहीं होता है कि ये सीरीज फ्री में कैसे अवेलेबल है। सॉरी मेरा यार नेट स्लो नहीं चल रहा, मेरा आज कंप्यूटर स्लो चल रहा है। मैंने अपडेट किया आज मेरा कंप्यूटर क्योंकि मेरे को एक सॉफ्टवेयर चलाना था। How to start a startup. So we are going to watch it. This is a YouTube channel. There is a separate YouTube channel for that. और हम आज इसका लास्ट लेक्चर देखेंगे। मैं वहां से कंटिन्यू करूंगा जहां तक मैंने देख लिया। ये स्टैनफोर्ड का एक पहले गाइस कंफर्म करो, कैन यू हियर?
Every founder I know wishes that they'd written down both of these, the how and the why, earlier, to just establish it as the company grows, and then this becomes what happens. I think it's one of the highest
Please
leverage
confirm in
things you can
comments
do
if you
that
can
people
hear
don't.
the YouTube sound.
All right, next area, HR. HR is another thing that most people correctly ignore in the first phase of a startup because, again, it's not writing code, it's not talking to users. But it's a huge mistake to continue to ignore it. And the reason that I think most founders ignore it is they have in their mind this idea of like TV sitcom HR, awfulness. But it doesn't have to slow you down. Actually, it speeds you up. Most founders will say out of one side of their mouth, people are most important.
तो आपको थोड़ा मैं बैकग्राउंड दे देता हूँ। सैम ऑल्टमैन इज लाइक द वन ऑफ द पार्टनर्स एट वाई कॉम्बिनेटर। वाई कॉम्बिनेटर दुनिया का सबसे बड़ा एक लाइक ही इज अमंग पॉल ग्राम एंड हिम is an American entrepreneur investor. He is the former president of Y Combinator and now the CEO of OpenAI. तो ये दुनिया के सबसे बड़े इन्वेस्टर्स और एंटरप्रेन्योर्स में आते हैं और इन्होंने ये सीरीज की थी स्टैनफोर्ड के साथ जिसमें इन्होंने बताया था कि स्टार्टअप कैसे बनाते हैं। और आप लोगों ने टीवीएफ पिक्चर्स वगैरह तो देखा ही होगा बट आप ये 20 एपिसोड देख लोगे ना, मेरे को अभी तक यकीन नहीं होता इसमें इतना 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 तगड़ा कंटेंट है ना। मैं ऐसे और ऐसे कमेंट स्टार्टिंग के एपिसोड्स पे देखोगे ये होली शिट ये फ्री में कैसे पड़ा है यूट्यूब पे। और स्टैनफोर्ड की सीरीज है और ये वाईकॉम और स्टैनफोर्ड और ये पूरा सैम ने कराया था। तो लेक्चर 1 इज आल्सो बाय सैम ऑल्टमैन जिसमें आके बोलते हैं कि पूरी सीरीज में जो भी आप लोग देखोगे जो 20 लेक्चर देने आ रहे दे आर लाइक एवरी पर्सन इज इन्वॉल्वड विद द मेकिंग ऑफ $1 billion कंपनी एंड आई वाज लाइक फक। एंड ये ट्रू है। इसमें ब्रायन चेस्की आ रहे हैं जिन्होंने एयरबीएनबी बनाई है, ट्विच के सीईओ आ रहे हैं जो गेमिंग वाली जो ऐप और वेबसाइट है, एंड पॉल ग्राहम आ रहे हैं अगेन हु इज एसोसिएटेड विद वाईकॉम, फेसबुक के को फाउंडर आ रहे हैं, एवरी पर्सन स्टार्टेड। तो हम ये वाला लेक्चर देखेंगे। मेरे को एनीवे देखना था तो मैंने सोचा आप लोगों के साथ देखूं और मैं मेरी स्ट्रीक ब्रेक नहीं करना चाहता था। सो एंड सैम ऑल्टमैन व्हाटएवर ही सेज इज गोल्ड। तो
an asset, and on the other side we don't want any HR. So what they mean is we don't want HR, we don't want like the bad kind of TV HR. What good HR means is a few things, a clear structure which we already talked about.
और ये आप देख लोगे सीरीज लाइक यू कैन स्टार्ट अ स्टार्टअप ऑन योर ओन। आई डोंट थिंक पीपल नीड टू मतलब कुछ किताबें और कुछ सीरीज देखनी होती है। माय ब्रदर लाइक इज आल्सो वेरी सक्सेसफुल एंटरप्रेन्योर सो उन्होंने यही कहा था तो ये सीरीज देख ले एंड इस because no one tells you these things जो इस सीरीज में and it's so bloody powerful.
A path for people about how they can evolve their careers. One of the most important things is performance feedback. Again, this happens organically early on. People know how they're doing. As the company gets to 25, 30, 45 people, that gets lost. And it doesn't have to be complex. It can be super simple, but there should be a way that it happens and it should be frequent. People need to hear pretty quickly how they're doing. And it should tie, if they're doing badly, to a way you get them out of the company, or if they're doing well, there should be a clear path to how this ties to compensation. And that's the next thing. In the early days of a startup, people's compensation is whatever they negotiate with the founder, and it's all over the place. As you grow, it feels hopelessly corporate, but it really is worth putting in place these compensation bands. So a mid-level engineer is in this range, a senior engineer is in this range. Here's how you move from this to this. And it keeps things really fair. Someday everyone will find out everyone else's comp. If it's all over the place, it will be a complete meltdown disaster. If you put these bands in place early, it will at least be fair. It will also save you a lot of crazy negotiation. One thing that I think is really important when it comes to HR is equity. Most people get this right now for the early employees. They give a lot of equity. But I think you should continue to give a lot of equity all the way through. And this is one place that your investors will always give you bad advice. I think, not YC, but all other investors give bad advice here. Most do. You should be giving out a lot of equity to your employees.
ये बहुत सही लाइन है. You should be giving out a lot of equities. मैं ना साथ साथ notes बना लूँ क्या guys? I hope you don't mind. Google Docs में मैं notes बना लेता हूँ. क्योंकि मेरे को बहुत आदत है, लेकिन मैं अभी so आप लोग भी वो notes देख पाओगे because this will really help. But like I'm quite amazed कि आप लोग रात को 2:30-3 बजे भी देखे. वो fuck 3 बज गए. You should be the laptop slow. We are giving out a lot of equity.
Now, this dilutes everyone, right? This dilutes you as the founder and the investors equally. For some reason, founders usually understand this is good. Investors are very short-sighted and don't want to.
Hey Ranjan, what's up? Kya hal chal, bro? Ayush Ranjan is here, my good old buddy.
Dilute themselves, so they'll like fight you over every equity grant. But we've seen a lot of data at YC now, and the most successful companies and the ones where the investors do the best end up giving a lot of stock out to employees year after year after year. So I tell founders, like, you should think about, for the next 10 years, you're going to be giving out 3 to 5% of the company every year because you just get bigger and bigger.
You'll be giving out 3 to 5% of the company every year.
So the individual grants get smaller, but in aggregate, it's a lot of stock. And I think this is really important to do. If you value your people, you should be doing this. Specifically, you need to do this with refresher grants. And you should get a plan in place for this early. I think you never want an employee in a place where they vested 3 out of their 4 years of stock and they start thinking about leaving. So you should always stay in front of people's vesting schedules and have a plan early where you have refresher grants in place. There are a lot of new structures that people have been using here. I personally like 6-year, big grants, but 6 years of vesting, because I think these companies just take a while to build. There's pyramid vesting where you back weight someone's grant, so in year 4 they get a lot more of the vesting than year 1. There's a concept, different names for it, but something like continuous forward vesting, where people's grants are automatically re-upped every year at the same number of shares.
I'm so sorry, okay जी, अगर PC hang हो रहा है, मैंने अभी 1 घंटे पहले ही मेरा PC update किया, but trust me, just stay with me, it will get better.
Whatever you decide, get an option management system in place at about this point. The normal way people do this is just someone keeps an Excel spreadsheet. I have seen mistakes that have cost employees or companies tens of millions of dollars because they didn't get this right. So there's really good option management systems or software, and you should get those in place around this point. The other sort of HR stuff to touch on, there are a bunch of rules that change around 50 employees. Common examples are that you have to start sexual harassment training and diversity training. There's a bunch of others as well, but just put a little pin in your mind that when you cross 50 employees, there's a new set of HR rules that you have to comply with. Monitor your team for burnout. Again, it's up to product market fit. It's just a sprint. Now it becomes a marathon. At this point, you actually don't want people to work 100 hours a week forever. You want them to go on vacation. You want them to have new challenges and do new things. And if you let the whole company get burned out all at once, that is often a company-ending thing. This is also a good time to put in place a hiring process. Another thing that most founders regret is they don't hire, as soon as everything is working, I think you should hire a full-time recruiter. If you do this too early, that's bad because you'll hire too fast, and that usually implodes. But most founders get behind the ball on this. There are a lot of other sort of just hiring process tips. For example, I think most companies, even until they get up to say 300 or 400 employees, should announce every offer on some internal mailing list or something before they make it. Because like half the time you do that, someone in the company will know something good or bad about that employee. And the companies that I know that have instituted this have been really happy. Also a good time to have a program in place to ramp up employees. So when someone starts, what does their first week look like? How do they get spun up? How do they learn everything they need to learn? Are they going to have a buddy that's going to think through them? That's going to help them think through kind of everything about the company. Here is one that you actually do need to think about before the 12 to 24 month mark, which is diversity on the
I'll try to reduce the quality. ना मेरे को भी दिख रहा है कि बहुत hack कर रहा है.
team. The most common place this comes up, honestly, is people that hire, all guys on their engineering team for the first 15 or 20 people. And at that point, you get a culture in place that sort of takes on a life of its own. And most founders that I've spoken to that have made this mistake regret it, and they wished they had hired some diversity of perspective on the team earlier on. Engineering teams are not the only place where it comes up, but that's where you see it the most often. And if you get this right early, you'll be able to grow the team much more quickly over the long term. The other thing to think about is what happens to your early employees. So a common situation that happens is the company evolves past the early employees. The company, so like you hire an engineer who's a really great engineer, but then as the engineering team grows, you need a VP of engineering. The early engineer wants to be the VP of engineering. You can't do that. But you don't want the early employee to leave. They're an important part of the culture. They know a lot. People love them. And so I think you want to be very proactive about this. You want to think about what's the path for my first 10 or 15 employees going to be as the company grows, and then just talk to them about it.
ये भी बहुत important line है. What's the path for the first 10 to 15 employees going to be, and then just talk to them about it.
Very directly, be upfront. I want sit them down and say, I want to talk about sort of where you want to see your career go inside of this company. All right, so company productivity. This is something that you don't need to think about in the early days because small teams are just sort of naturally productive most of the time. But as you grow, the productivity, I think, goes down with the square of the number of employees if you don't make an effort, because it's sort of one of these connections between nodes. Every pair of people adds communication overhead. And so if you don't start thinking about the systems that you're going to put in place when the company is 25 to 50 people to stay productive as you grow, things will grind to a halt faster than you can imagine. The single word that matters most, I think, to keep the company productive as it grows is alignment. The reason companies become unproductive is people are either not on the same page and don't know what the same priorities are, or they're actively working against each other, which is obviously worse. But if you can keep the entire company aligned in the same direction, you'll have won well over half of the battle. And the way to start with this is just a very clear roadmap and goals. Everyone in the company should know what the roadmap for the next 3 or 6 months or a year, depending on where the company is in its life cycle, looks like. A classic test that I love to give is if I walk into a company beginning to struggle with these scaling issues, I'll ask the founders, if I walked around and pulled 10 random employees and asked them what the top 3 goals for the company are right now, would they all say the same thing? And 100% of the time, the founder says, yes, of course they would. And then I go do it, and 100% of the time, no 2 employees even say the same top 3 goals in order. And the founders can never believe it because they're like, well, I announced it in all hands 3 months ago what our goals were going to be, and how can they not remember? But it's really important to keep reiterating the message about the roadmap and the goals. And almost no founder does this enough. And if you do it, the company will say, all right, these are our goals, we understand them, we're going to get them done. And it'll self-organize around that. But if people don't know what the roadmap or the goals are, it won't happen. We already talked about figuring out your values early, but I want to reiterate that because that also will really help the company make the right decisions. If everyone knows what the framework to decide is, they'll make, hopefully, the same decisions if they're smart people. You want to continue to be run by great products and not process for its own sake. This is a fine, fine line because you do need to put some process in place, but you never want to put process in place that rewards the process. The focus has to always be on great product. One easy way to do this that a lot of companies try is they just say, we're going to ship something every day. And if you do that, there's at least a continued focus on delivery.
So, okay जी मैं आपको थोड़ा बताता हूँ since you are like asking कि पहले 20 वाले lectures किस बारे में थे तो इन्होंने एक separate channel बनाया हुआ है where they have like uploaded the 20 lectures which are like too good. यार मेरा laptop बहुत slow हो गया. I'm so sorry guys. I am definitely going to like look into it and make it faster. तो ये 20 lectures है. So जैसे एक है before the startup building product competition is for losers. Peter Thiel अगर आपने social network देखी है तो आपने नाम सुना होगा. He is one of the investors of Facebook and growth, how to build products, how to get started, how to raise money, culture, hiring, building for enterprise, how to be a gate founder, how to operate, how to manage, how to run a user interview, how to design hardware products, legal and accounting basics, sales और later stage advice कि जब आपका startup बड़ा हो जाता है तो क्या करना चाहिए.
And then transparency and rhythm in how you communicate are really important. Most founders wait way too long on these, but having a management meeting every week of just the people that report directly to the founder, the CEO, critical.
Have a management meet every week. Critical.
All hands meetings, not quite sure how often is optimal for those. At least once a month, where you go through the results and the roadmap with the entire company, really important. And then, doing a plan every quarter of what we're going to get done over the next 3 months and how that fits into our goals for the year also becomes really important. I put offsites up there because I don't think people do those nearly enough. A surprising number of the successful companies we've been involved with do a lot of offsites, where they'll take their best people for a weekend to a cabin in the woods or somewhere and just talk about what do we want to be when we grow up, what are our most important things to be doing, what are we not doing that we should be doing, but get people out of the office and out of the day-to-day. Everyone I know that does those thinks they're well worth the time. So the goal in all of this productivity planning is that you're trying to build a company that creates a lot of value over a long period of time. And the long period of time is what's important here. You can avoid all of this and just like with the authority of the founder.
Thank you. Okay जी, आप मेरे को एक बार email कर दो, मैं आपको call करूँगा फिर. My email ID is vaibhavmunjal25@gmail.com.
Make sure the company ships a great next version. But that won't work for version 10. It won't work for version 11.
Build a company that creates enduring value over a long period of time. बहुत सही line है.
I really believe that the single hardest thing in business is building a company that does repeatable innovation and just has this ongoing culture of excellence as it grows. If you look at the examples of this,
बहुत सही term है. Do repeatable innovations with a culture of excellence.
Most companies fail here. Most companies do one great thing where the founder just pushes to get it done, and then don't innovate that well on follow-on products. And
बहुत सही लाइन, मतलब सैम वॉल्टमैन तो एक एक लाइन ऐसी बोलता है ना. Most companies do one great thing. थोड़ा सा पीछे जाता है, पूरी लाइन वापस सुनता है.
done, and then don't innovate that well on follow-on products.
And don't innovate that well on following products.
And it really takes founders that think about how I'm going to do this second thing, this really hard thing, to get something like an Apple that can churn out great products for 30 or 40 years or longer. All right, these are super tactical mechanics. This is definitely to just put on a list and remember these things for later. All right, in the early days, people basically ignore all accounting, and they have, like, maybe if they're lucky, a shoebox full of receipts. They certainly don't have anything that looks like a financial report. This is a good time to get it in place. You know, when things are working, say month 18 or whatever, you can do this with an outsourced person. Just say, you know what, we want to get our books in order. We want to start getting audits every year. We want to start a relationship with an accounting firm. Easy to do, definitely worth it. This is also a good time to collect your legal documents, because it's easy to fix things now. So if you actually assign someone to go through and collect every agreement the company has ever signed, then when your landlord tries to screw you out of your lease and no one can find the lease, which happens like half the time somehow, someone will be able to find it. Also, you're almost certainly missing something. You know, some employee didn't sign their PIIA or whatever, and you'll find it now. It's easy to fix now. It gets really hard to fix like in the middle of your next round of financing. So again, this is time to bring like a little bit of the order to chaos. FF stock is a special class of stock for founders that the founders can sell in a later round without messing up the common stock valuation. It used to be that most people set this up right when they started the company. Founders Fund sort of popularized this, which is why it's called FF stock. But it became a really bad signal, right? Founders that were obsessed with their own personal liquidity when the company had nothing turned out to like fail most of the time. And so investors learned that if founders pushed on this in the seed round, it was a very, very bad sign. Most founders don't actually want to sell stock until the company is worth like $1 billion or something like that. So I think you can actually safely set this up after things start working in the next financing round, and then you can sell it 2, 3, 4 years down the road. But it's a good thing to remember by about the time you get to the B round. IP, trademarks, and patent. Actually, just IP and trademarks. So you have 12 months after you announce something if you want to patent it. And if you miss that window, it's very hard to do. So 11 months after you launch, or first publicly talk about what you're doing, is a good time to file provisional patents. We recommend people just file provisional patents. All that does is like hold your place in line at the patent office, and it gives you another year to decide if you want to patent something or not. It only costs about $1,000. It takes way less effort than a full patent. And most of the time you'll know whether or not you need the full patent a year later. But if you just do this one step, you'll at least have the option. It's also a good time to file trademarks for the US and major international markets. Again, if you don't do this at this stage, most people end up regretting it. And while you're at it, a good time to grab all the domains. FP&A, good time also, I think, to think about someone to start doing FP&A. I think most companies don't end up realizing where the knobs on their financial model are until far too late. And I think it turns out that if you have someone build a really great model at the business, and by really great, apparently Roelof Botha, who was the PayPal CFO and built their FP&A model, the top the top sheet of his spreadsheet was 1,500 lines, just as a level of the detail people build these to. But you can really optimize the business and understand it at a level that I think most people totally miss. Most people don't hire someone like this until they're many hundreds of employees. I think it's worth hiring earlier. Another thing that I think is worth hiring earlier, that almost no one does, is a full-time fundraiser. Let's say you hire someone like really, really great, and their full-time job is to raise money for the company. You hire them after your B round, and you say, you know what, by the time we raise our C round, we want the valuation to be double what it would have been otherwise. You almost certainly get better results than if you hire an investment banker or someone else, if it's just someone internal to the company, and you end up paying way less money and take like literally half the dilution. So I think this is one of these like slightly non-obvious optimizations that people just fail to make. Tax structuring. So this is another thing. Once things are working, it would be worth you spending a little bit of time thinking about how you set up the tax structure for the company. I confess I don't know a lot about the details here because I just find it personally really boring. But like somehow if you assign all the IP to like some corporation in Ireland that licenses it back to the US corporation, you end up paying like no tax, no corporate tax. But I know you can only do that like relatively early on. And this ends up being a huge issue for companies that don't do it, that compete with companies that do it, once they're big public companies. So that's worth doing. A lot of people throughout the class have talked about your own psychology as a founder. Here's what they haven't said. It gets worse, not better. As the company grows, you continue to oscillate. The highs are better, but the lows keep getting worse. And
Fuck. काफी तगड़ी line. As the company grows, the highs are better, but the lows keep on getting worse.
And you really want to think about this early on and just be aware that this is going to happen. And try to manage your own psychology through the expanding swings that it's going to go through. Another thing that happens as you begin to be successful, as you go from being someone that most people rooted for, kind of the underdog, to someone that a lot of people start hating on.
Fuck. You go from being the underdog to someone most people hate. Jesus Christ. देख रहे हो guys?
And you see this first in internet commenters who will be like, I can't believe this shitty company raised money. It fucking sucks, like awful. And it only bothers you a little bit, but then like journalists that you kind of care about start writing this, and it just goes on and on. This also will go on and on as you get more and more successful, and you just have to make peace with this early. But if you don't, it will bother you all the way through. This is also a good time to start thinking about how long of a journey this is going to be. Very few founders think long term. Most founders think kind of a year in advance, and they think that, you know what, in 3 years I'm going to sell my company, and either I'm going to become a VC or sit on the beach or something. Because so few people make an actual long-term commitment to what they're building, the ones that do have a huge advantage. They're in a very rarefied class. And so this is a good time to like sit around with your co-founders and decide, you know what, we're going to work on this for a very long time. And we're going to build a strategy that assumes that we're going to be doing this for the next 10 years. Just thinking that way alone, I think is probably a very high leverage thing you can do for success. Take vacation. Another common thing that we see is founders will run their business for 3 or 4 years without ever taking more than a day of vacation. And that works for like a year or 2 years or something like that. It really leads to nasty burnout if you don't do it. Losing focus is another way that founders get off track. I actually think this is a symptom of burnout. When you get really burned out on running the business, you want to do easier things or sort of more gratifying things. You want to go to conferences and have people tell you how great you are. You know, you want to do all these things that are not actually building the business. And the most common post-YC failure case for the companies we fund is that they're incredibly focused during YC on their company, and then after they start doing a lot of other things. You know, they advise companies, they go to conferences, whatever. Focus is what made you successful in the first place. There are a lot of reasons people lose focus, but fight against that really, really hard. This is the special case of focus. As you start to do well, you will start to get a bunch of potential acquirers sniffing around. And it's very gratifying. And you're like, wow, I could be so rich and I'd be so cool. And M&A negotiations feel really fun. This is one of the biggest killers of companies, is that they entertain acquisition conversations.
Gold. Acquisition की spelling से लिखी क्या है? ACQI.
Conversations. You distract yourself. You get demoralized if it doesn't happen. If an offer does come in and it's really low, you've already like mentally thought that you're done, and so you take the offer. As a general rule, don't start any acquisition conversation unless you're willing to sell for a pretty low number. Don't ever just check it, hoping that you're going to have the one miracle high offer. If that's going to happen, you'll know, because they'll just make you a big offer before you even meet them. But this is a big company killer. And then, just as a reminder to everybody, the thing that kills startups at some level is the founders giving up. So sometimes you should quit, but if you miss.
और जो लोग देख रहे हैं मेरे को अपने email IDs भेजो. I'll send you a mail अभी के अभी जो मैं मेरे notes बना रहा हूँ. I'll share it with you guys.
Manage your own psychology, and you quit.
Comments में अपने email IDs लिखो.
When you shouldn't. That is what kills companies. I mean, that is the sort of final cause of death for most of these startups. And so if you can manage your own psychology in a way that you don't quit, and don't get to a place where you need to quit or give up on the startup, you'll be in a far, far better place. So marketing and PR is something that we tell companies to ignore for a long time. Everyone thinks in the early days that the press is going to be what saves them. We tell them all the time it doesn't work that way. It's definitely true. You know, press is not what's going to save your startup. But as you start to be successful, this is something that the founders themselves need to spend time on. So once your product is working, switch from not caring about this to caring about it a little bit. And the two most important things for the founders to do, figure out the key messaging yourselves. Never outsource this to your head of marketing or PR firm. Founders have to figure out what the message of the company is going to be.
Fuck, this is so important. It reminds you of so many mistakes so many people have made. I know. Don't outsource the key message.
And once you set that, it kind of sticks. Very hard to change this once the press decides how they're going to talk about you. The other thing is getting to know key journalists yourself. PR firms will always try to prevent you from doing this because they need to have a reason to exist. And so they're like, we're going to handle the relationship with the journalist. We'll just bring you in for interviews. No journalist wants to talk to a PR flack ever. They're so much more happy to. Just hear from a founder. I think the biggest PR hack you can do is to not hire a PR firm. Just pick 3 or 4 journalists that you develop really close relationships with, that like you, that understand you, that you get. And then you contact them yourself. They will cover every story you ever give them, and they'll actually pay attention, get to know you, and care about the company. This is so much better than the normal strategy of having a PR firm blast 200 contacts that never read their emails with every piece of news. So this is something that I think is important to start doing. This is also the time in a company when business development starts to matter. And so in the early days, you can basically ignore anything that would be like doing deals, except maybe fundraising and sales. This is a time when they're important, and everything, or many things that you do, like even fundraising, it falls under the category of doing deals. So here's my 1-minute crash course on this. There are 5 points that I think are important to understand here. We've talked about this a lot. Nothing will matter if you don't build a great product. So assume that you've done this before you go try and get anyone to do anything with you. Developing a personal connection with anyone you're trying to do any sort of big deal with is really important. For whatever reason, most founders fail to do this, or many founders fail to do this. But no one wants to feel like they're this transactional thing, that you're using them to get distribution for your product or to raise money or whatever. And so figuring out some way to actually care about this person and care about what you're doing with them and not view them, you have to, in your own mind, not just view them as this one-off transaction. You have to actually care about them and what they're going to get out of this. Competitive dynamics. So this is like basic principle of negotiation. Most founders learn this the first time in fundraising, but it actually matters for everything. The way you get deals done and the way you get good terms is to have a competitive situation. If you don't do this deal with party A, you're going to do it with party B. It's not always an option, but it usually is. And this is like the single thing that makes deals happen and makes deals move. Tyler talked about persistence at the last lecture, so I won't hit on that again too much, other than to say you have to go beyond your comfort point here most of the time as a founder. And then the 5th point is you have to ask for what you want. This is another thing. I still have trouble with this, and certainly most of the founders we do have. If you want something in a deal, just ask for it. Most of the time, you won't get laughed out of the room, and you might get it. But you have to be like, at some point, you actually have to say, this is what I would like you to do, even if it feels aggressive or an overreach or whatever. So I want to close this part of the talk with an image. One of the Airbnb founders drew this on like a business card or something for another founder that was starting a company, and then I saw it once and took a picture of it because I thought it was such a good summary. And what he had tried to draw here was the Y Combinator process, as he remembered it. And I love it because it's like so simple and it looks so doable when it's written on a business card. But you're trying to find product market fit. You're trying to build a product and you're trying to close the gap between those 2 gears. The only way to do that is to go off and meet the people. You cannot do this without getting really, really close to your users.
Go meet the people. ओके जी का मैसेज है मेरे पास. आपको मैं ओके जी पूरा भेजूंगा जो मैं नोट्स बना रहा हूँ. कि मैंने एक छोटा सा डाल दिया but
And then
Ayush Ranjan is saying Apple did the same mistake of hiring multiple PR firms after they fired Steve Jobs. Correct, brother, correct. Glad you're here. अभी भी तू देख रहा है साथ में.
he drew this graph that is sort of on a whiteboard at YC and gotten kind of like one of the YC rites of passage. But that's the graph of how adoption goes for a new company. So you launch in the press, you get a huge spike, it falls off to nothing. At some point, at least one point, things look like they're going to completely die and kind of dip below the x-axis. They recover a little bit. You have this long, long, long trough of sorrow before things work. In Airbnb's case, it was 1,000 days before the graph started ticking upward. You have these wiggles of false hope, and then finally, things start to grow 3 years later. So starting a startup ends up being this very long process. It is, it can be really rewarding. It's definitely long, but it is doable, and that's what I love about that drawing. So with that, I think I have about 10 minutes left. I can answer questions on this or anything else in the course that we've covered, if anyone has some. Yes?
You talked about diversity being important, but an earlier speaker said diversity wasn't important, and you should just hire people that are very much like you, and then you can trust them.
So here is the question is, how do you square the divisive diversity being important with earlier speakers saying you want people that are very similar? The difference, what you want is you want diversity of backgrounds, but you don't want diversity of vision. Like where companies get in trouble is when they have people that think very differently about what the company should be doing or don't work well.
What a great line. You want diversity of backgrounds, not diversity of vision. What a great fucking line.
Altogether. You don't want that. You do want to hire people that you know and that you trust and that you can work with. But if everyone on the team comes from exactly the same background, you do end up developing somewhat of a monoculture, which often causes problems down the road. Not always. Some companies have been successful with that. So what we tell people is hire people that you know and that you've worked with before, but try to hire people that are complementary and aligned towards the same goal, not people that are exactly the same, because you just get a better skill set. Yeah.
So what are some examples of ways to think about productivity tracking on a personal level, especially when you're running companies? Like how do you do that on a personal level and also on a management level?
How to keep track productivity systems. So the one I use, which I actually think works really well, is I keep one piece of paper with my goals for sort of a 3 to 12 month time frame, and I look at that every day. And then separately, I keep one page for every day of my short-term goals for that day. And so if I need to do something in like a week, I just flip forward 7 pages and write it down. And then I also keep a list of every person and what they're working on and what I need to tell them and what I need to talk to them about, what we talked about last time. So every time I sit down with someone, I kind of have the full state and a list of things for that person. That works really well. Yes?
So we've talked a lot about startups growing, but most startups fail.
Yeah.
Any advice for kind of how to fail gracefully?
Yeah, great question. We should have covered it. How to fail gracefully. So,
But ये बहुत अच्छा क्वेश्चन पूछा. पता नहीं लोग हंसेंगे how to fail gracefully. मतलब मैंने तो सोचा मेरी TED Talk का नाम ही होगा like failing, how to fail publicly. And Kate Blanchett का एक failing के ऊपर quote भी है कि if you know that you are going to fail, just jump right ahead and fail gloriously. पता ही है जब fail होना तो सब कुछ डाल के fail होना. So I think he'll also give a great answer.
Most startups fail, and Silicon Valley almost goes too far in how much it loves failure. Failure still sucks. You should still try not to fail. And this whole thing of failure is great, I don't agree with. But it will happen to most people most of the time. And it's a very forgiving environment. As long as you are upfront about it and ethical and don't let anyone get into a bad situation. So if you're failing, first of all, you should tell your investors. And second of all, you should not totally run out of money. What you don't want is a blow.
Sorry, मैं आपका comment पढ़ने लग गया था. Like, I need to hear this again.
It's a very forgiving environment. As long as you are upfront about it and ethical and don't let anyone get into a bad situation. So
It's a very forgiving environment as long as you're ethical about it, upfront about it.
if you're failing, first of all, you should tell your investors. And second of all, you should not totally run out of money. What you don't want is a blow up with a bunch of debts that the company owe and everyone showing up to work one day and the door being locked. You'll know when you're failing. You'll know when the company things just aren't going to work, and you should just tell your investors, like, hey, sorry, this isn't going to work. No one will be surprised. Like, I expect to lose I'm willing to lose my money on every investment I ever make. I know that happens most of the time, and the winners pay for it, still with a factor of 100, so it's okay. People will be very understanding and supportive, but you want to tell people early. You don't want to surprise them, and you don't want to let your employees get shocked one day when they don't have a job. You want to shut the company down in a graceful way, help them find jobs, make sure you give them 2 or 4 weeks of severance payment so that they're not suffering a cash flow problem. All of this stuff is pretty important. Yes?
How many immigrant founders have you seen in Y Combinator?
How many immigrant founders have we seen in Y Combinator? In the last batch, I think it probably went up for this next batch. In the last batch, 41% of the founders we funded were born outside the US. From 30 different countries. So it's a pretty big percentage.
And apart from the Silicon Valley, what do you think are other good places to start a startup?
Apart from the Valley, where do I think are other good places to start a startup? Well, I still think the Valley is the best by a very significant margin, but I think it's finally maybe beginning to weaken a little bit because the costs have just gotten so out of control. To be clear, if I was going to start a company, I still wouldn't think about it. I would still pick Silicon Valley. And I think if you look at the data of companies over the last few years, Valley still wins by a lot. But Seattle, LA, lots of places outside the US, I think all of these make sense.
What places outside
I hesitate to make recommendations there because I haven't spent enough time in the cities to really have an intuitive feel. But you know as well as I do the common ones people talk about startup hubs, and I can't make a personal recommendation there.
I like how he did not recommend when he wasn't confident about it. बहुत अच्छा किया इसने. Very, very, very smart.
When did the founders start to think about hiring a professional CEO, like senior guys?
When should the founders think about hiring a professional CEO? Never. If you look at the most successful companies in tech, they are run by their founders for a very long time, sometimes forever. And sometimes they even hire a professional CEO and then realize that is not going to build a great company. And so Larry Page came back to be CEO again. I think if you don't want to be the long-term CEO of a company, you probably shouldn't start one. I'm not totally sure about that. I think there are exceptions. But generally, the transition I talked about today of you go from building a great product to building a great company, being a founder, for 9 of the 10 years is going to be about building that great company. And if you're not excited about doing that, I think you should think hard about it.
रंजन तो सही कह रहा है क्योंकि 2014 का वीडियो ना तो now काफी रेपो खराब हो ही गई है सिलिकॉन वैली की. So after 6 years it has all gone down.
Yes.
What are some of the most common and most alarming warning signs you should be looking for when you're trying to make this shift from building a great product to building a great company?
What are the most common mistakes to make when you're shifting towards building a great company? I think I went through most of them here. I try to put everything in here that I see people mess up most of the time. Yes.
ये मेरे को बेस्ट लगता है because these people prepare so hard for their presentations. इसमें एक line जो लिखी है it's like a gold mine, and when someone asks a question which is not good, they are कितना humble तरीके से उसने बोला मैंने bro एक चीज cover की है. He did not even try to repeat them. So I like that so much. सब कुछ बोल चुका हूँ मैं. Very humbly though.
Is there a way to get involved in the YCOM community before getting accepted?
Is there a way to get involved with YC before getting funded? No, and intentionally not. Actually, I'll say the one thing you can do is if you work at a YC company and then later apply, I think that probably not probably, that definitely, if you get a good recommendation from those founders, will help with YC. So, working at a YC company helps. But there's not much you can do to help, and that's intentional. There is no pre-startup in the way that there is pre-med. You should just focus on whatever you're doing. And then when you start a startup, there are things like YC and others that are structured to help you. Most of the founders we fund, we don't know at all before we do it. You really don't need to get to know us or get involved. We're all good that way. Yes?
There's a statistic you're saying now harder to get into Y Combinator than get into Harvard. So I'm curious the criteria that you use to pick up startups.
So he has done this, by the way, what you are saying in comments, Ranjan. I like how Sam reiterates the question to better analyze the question. I think basically why he does this is because क्योंकि इसको पता ही है final videos की importance तो video format में होगी. So he repeats the whole thing क्योंकि जिससे video में proper आ जाए क्योंकि audience के पास तो mic नहीं है ना तो he is very well aware कि इसका video content कितना important and that is why he reiterates the questions. भाई इंडिया का startup है बैंगलोर है या बॉम्बे है bro तो बैंगलोर है यार. Meet Ayush Ranjan, the guy who will help you set a base in Bangalore.
Does it change over time?
The question is, what criteria do we use to pick startups, and has it gotten harder? Or has it changed? The two things that we need to see are good founders and a good idea. And without both of those, we won't fund a company. But that hasn't changed. That has always been the case. The applicant pool to YC has grown quite a bit, but a lot of the growth is, people that shouldn't be starting startups anyway, probably, that are just doing it because it's sort of the cool thing now. So, if you're really passionate about an idea and the idea is good and you're, smart and you get things done and you're executing, I still think you have a very reasonable shot at YC, even though the headline number is bigger. Yes?
There's a certain market that you're really excited about but don't necessarily know a lot about yet. Is there a certain path that you recommend or ways to?
Sure. If there's a market that you're excited about but don't know a lot about yet, what should you do? Two schools of thought on this. One is to just jump right in, learn it as you go. That's worked a lot of times. The other is to go work at a company in the space or do something in the market for a year or 2 years. I lean slightly towards the second, but as long as you're willing to really learn and really study and really get uncomfortably close to your users, either case will work. And I don't even think it's that much of a disadvantage. I think all things being equal, I would go spend a couple of years learning about it in detail, but I don't think you have to. Yes?
I have a question related to YC too. Yeah, so I think YC did a fantastic job in promoting entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley. In fact, as an institutional investor, actually I invested 3 of the YC in the past few years. But however, right now it seems like you guys have 180 companies a year dumping into the market, and it looks like it's hard to follow each of the YC company anymore. Do you think this will create some, some people will walk away from YC because they cannot follow such a large batch of companies? And usually, in the old days, the company has to be very polished and the fund has to be think over and over about the idea, develop tons of VC in some row, and then they got funded. But right now, it seems like the young founders, it's easy to access the capital.
All right, so I think the question is, do I think investors are going to fund less YC companies as we grow? No. Definitely not. Certainly the trend in this is the other way. We have more and more investors saying that, half their portfolio is now YC companies and they look forward to the day where it's 3/4. No, I don't think that's a problem at all. I think that is so not on my top 100 problem list. The opposite of that, maybe. All right, one more question. Yes?
Last question of the series.
Raise a seed fund, or the first month.
When should a group of founders raise some seed money? This is a great question. I think that in general, it's nice to wait until you have the idea figured out and initial signs of promise before you raise money. Raising money puts some pressure on the company, some time pressure, and once you've raised money, you can't be in this exploratory phase indefinitely. You end up having to rush. And so, like, if you haven't raised money and your idea is not working, you can, like, flail around and pivot until you really hit on the thing that's working. But if you've raised money and your idea doesn't work, you're in this like, oh shit moment, and you have to pivot. And you pivot to whatever the first vaguely plausible idea is. And that's bad. So I think...
Okay, let me write this. This is important. Pivoting after raising money when your original idea doesn't work is bad.
If you can wait to raise any outside capital, more than say like $100,000 or $200,000 if necessary, but ideally not even that, until things are working or at least pointed in the direction of working, you're way better off. All right, thank you all very much. This was fun.
Fuck guys, तो like I'll be very honest, मैंने तो बहुत ही एक बोरिंग सा लेक्चर देखा पूरा, ये मेरे को खत्म करना था एंड मेरा टिक मार्क लग गया आज के काम पे, so I was just being selfish, but this is great fucking lecture. Sam Altman का lecture number 1 है और lecture number 20 is he started and ended the series. तो boring नहीं है, but like if you want to watch one before the startup, आप ये पॉल ग्राहम का lecture देखना. This is too motherfucking good. एंड बाकी भी अच्छे, बट आई एम नॉट वेरी हैप्पी विद द स्ट्रीम वी डिड टुडे, क्योंकि लाइक मेरा लैपटॉप में लैग आ रहा है. आई विल ट्राई टू फिगर आउट कि कैसा है. आई माइट आल्सो नॉट make the video public because of the lag which was there throughout the video. But thank you for watching guys. This was really fun and अब मेरे को एक डॉक्यूमेंट्री देखनी है जो मैं कल चलचित्र पे recommend करूँगा. So I'll go and get to work. Thank you guys. I'll see you soon. Bye.